Okay, we're back for more Script Camp. We have week 1 of Pilot Bootcamp, which is a continuation of last week's week 0 session, in which we just went over the very basics of how does TV writing work and why would you want to write a TV pilot and what is a TV pilot and all these kind of just basic, early questions. And this class is going to be more focused on refining those ideas that you started out, that you kicked off our last week's class with. So you will have some feedback that you've already received on those ideas that you will hopefully be incorporating today. And by the end of class today, we want to have really rock solid log lines for both your pilot and also your series. So those are some of the goals. Also, we just want to be filling up those sketchbooks. If you were in that last session, we mentioned the sketchbook is this document where you're going to be just putting all of your early research material and all of your notes and ideas for characters and scenes and locations and rules of the world and images and links to videos or different books that you're going to be using as sources or anything like that. So continue to be filling out that sketchbook, and even in class, you should be adding more to the sketchbook or taking notes based on things that you're hearing. Maybe just you have a section of your sketchbook for just notes on things that are interesting to me or things that I'm working on. So be working during class. I recommend that you use this time to be modifying your log lines and improving them as much as possible. And you can also be working on other stuff, like if you haven't chosen comps yet for your pilot idea, then you should be choosing those not more than two comps, which are going to be giving the suggestion of like the tone promise or the type of show that we're getting into. So there's lots of little things that you can be doing while you are listening to classes, and I recommend you be catching up and filling in those blanks if you have not already done so. Let's jump in. So Script Camp, if you've not been with us before, or if you're just joining us, go ahead.
Sorry, Connor, just to let you know, the stream isn't running in the Discord channel yet.
Oh, that's a good point. I often forget about that one. Let me bring it up here. There we go. Okay, so let's look at our introduction here. So what is Script Camp? If you've not been with us or if you're just joining us today, we are a screenwriting community that is focused on getting you from idea to completed draft of a script and then a more improved draft of that script, with the overall goal of sort of just helping you get better at writing. It's like a gym you go to do the reps and run the laps and just get better at writing. We have lots of free classes like this one. This is a free week 1 of our 6-week TV writing program that will go all the way from this idea to this first draft of a brand new pilot in just 6 weeks. Or I guess it's more like 8 weeks because we have that week 0, and then you have the week that follows our last class. So 8 weeks is plenty of time to write a pilot. And we have paid classes like these boot camps. So continuing after today, we will be entering the actual the paid version of the boot camp. So if you want to continue past the class and you've not already signed up, you must sign up before next session. So if you've not already done that, you can do so at scriptcamp.net, and you can either buy the class on its own or become a member. You can, do I have a slide for that? Yes, here it is. Scriptcamp.net/membership. You can make sure to reserve that slot by, just informing us in the chat that you are going to be signing up, even if you've not already done so, and we can give you early access to all those exclusive chat channels, our video library, and all that other great stuff. So you don't have to do this right now, but before next class meeting, you should make sure to have signed up for either membership or for the class. About me, I am a pro Hollywood writer that has been working since 2017 when I got signed for the first time. I have a script set up at a major production company in town, and I have placed in Nickel semifinals. Many other things. You can just look at this if you want to. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the point is I teach the boot camps that we have done so far, except for playwriting. I have taught pilot, feature, horror thriller, pitching, and I'm teaching an upcoming sci-fi boot camp, which is going to be on Saturdays, so that should be super cool. What are the boot camps? We go from idea to first draft using this step-by-step practical method with these 2-hour weekly class sessions. It's like a class in school almost, except that you're not actually getting grades or anything like that. We're just trying to make sure that you're staying on track and finishing in the reasonable sort of projection of the time frame of the class. We have 8 weeks for the feature, 6 weeks for TV, and we've done 6 weeks for stage, so that class is currently not running live, and there's you can go back to the recordings of the previous classes that we've done if you are a member. We have 4 weeks for pitching, 4 weeks for horror thriller, and 4 weeks for the upcoming sci-fi bootcamp, which will be the next 4 Saturdays from 12 to 2 Pacific time. So if you want feedback on your scripts, there are many free options to do so on our server. A bootcamp does not include detailed feedback on every single draft that you do, because that would just not be possible for just me and Nacho to do for the number of students that are here. So if you want that detailed feedback, the best way to do it is to start arranging swaps and groups with other peers with people who are also trying to do the same sort of stuff that you are, which we actually have a way for doing now. You can start a group on the server. You can fill out our form to begin and organize your own brand new genre-based group, or you can join an existing group. We have one for horror, one for sketch, and one for just general comedy. We have table reads on Sundays. That's later today at 2 o'clock. We have table reads. Script swaps are on Tuesdays. And then we have writers' labs as well, which are on weekends, Saturdays from 4 to 6. You can come with up to 5 pages of anything you're working on for detailed, personal, one-on-one feedback on whatever questions you have, and whatever documents you want to have looked at. Beyond that, you can get a script consultation from me on the website, scriptcamp.net/coverage, and you can have me mark up the script with notes and then give you a half-hour call to highlight the major points and also answer any questions that you have. So we've been over all the business stuff, so now let's get into the class itself. So let's look at the overview for today, which is going to be week 1. We're going to finalize those series and pilot loglines, meaning that if you had one from last week that you've modified, we can look at a revised version of it today, and it won't be quite at the end of class. We're starting to look at these a little earlier in the class to give you more time to be revising it before the end. And you're just going to be filling out that sketchbook. You're still in the gathering phase right now. Before you can, make a delicious soup, you have to actually go out and gather all the berries and twigs or whatever. Do I know anything about making soup? No. Are twigs in soup? Sure. But you're the hunter-gatherer. You have to go out and get the deer and get the berries and get the whatever before you can bring it back and decide, okay, what am I actually going to cook with this? So you have to go out and just be filling out this sketchbook with as widely as possible, with no wrong answers of things to include. Ideas that you want to have, you can be as kind of as ambitious as you want, but just do keep in mind the limitations of what you're doing, which is a piece of entertainment that lasts for half an hour or 1 hour at the absolute most, which is for half an hour. That's just especially for half an hour, it's just not a lot of time. So you cannot keep adding stuff forever, and you can't write more episodes because no one's going to read past a pilot, and chances are your first, I'm going to say, dozen pilots are not going to be really professional quality anyway. So don't worry about that as much as you do learning the process and learning how to organize this and picking ideas for the bootcamp that you are not as attached to, so as to, you should still pick the thing that's most exciting to you, but maybe just don't pick something that's going to limit your ability to write it in 6 weeks and the limitations of what's there. So be choosing your ideas based on, that's kind of fresh and new and exciting to me, and I could write that for 6 weeks and maybe just get it out of my system, that kind of thing, rather than picking something that has to be a masterpiece before you would be happy about it, because you're like, I must do justice to this historical atrocity, or I must tell my father's story exactly as it happened, or I must tell this story of my life. If it's one of those things, then it's probably not the right choice for a boot camp, because those are all things that will take significantly longer than 6 weeks to research and organize and adequately execute to the full extent of its potential. So remember to angle your ideas towards stuff that is executable in a 6-week time frame in the limitations of what we are doing, which is very, very limited. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to be doing today. Finalizing those loglines, and we spend that extra time early on making sure we get that logline right, because setting those initial promises and setting up the expectations of what your audience is getting into is the best way to calibrate. Am I delivering on those promises in the first place, which is how people basically decide if they like what they're watching or not. They say, is this giving me the type of experience that I expected? And often a big part of that experience will be, I want it to include the sorts of things that are promised in the genre, and include the sorts of things that are promised in the title or the early scenes that are going to be sort of telling me what's going to be happening in this, but I want to see those delivered in a slightly different way that I haven't seen exactly like before. So be thinking this whole time, how am I delivering this kind of Oreo pizza thing? Or, you order a pizza, they show up, or they say, sorry, we're out of pizza, and then they open the box and there's Oreo pizza inside. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, you give them the thing they asked for, but you're giving it to them in a way they never thought they were exactly going to get. So that's the basics of what we're doing here. Let's just have a really quick preview of what's coming up ahead. Week 2 is on broad strokes, and that story beat summary, which is just like a list of those events in the right order of that they're supposed to occur in the script. Those major scenes are going to be nailed down here, that you don't have to have every single scene denoted and fully explicated. Then week 3 is going to be expanding that outline into that scene card document, which is a scene card is a paragraph-long description of what happens in a scene. You're going to have one for every single scene. You're going to know the pages that those moments occur on. Week 4, first act. Week 5, second act. Week 6, third act. Very basic from then on out. You're going to be writing a third of the script every single week, with a slight incentive, therefore, applied to half-hour scripts, because that's half as much work to do in as much time. So you're going to be writing 10 pages a week if it's half an hour, 20 pages a week if it's full hour. That means that's, 2 pages on just weekdays if you're writing half an hour, or 4 pages on weekdays if you're writing full hour. Try to commit to that and try to keep that momentum up and try not to let things distract you, or don't be starting other projects. You need to build this discipline of, I'm going to commit to this for 6 weeks until it's done, and then it is a solid finish line for me to be working towards. Because you yourself, because humans, like, we are looking at stories for some of the same things that we're looking for in life, which are the sense of, as Sanderson talks about in his lectures, the sense of promises, progress, and payoff. That's sort of what we crave in real life all the time, and stories are just like mini versions of the things that we always crave, that we sort of hack our brains to find a way to entertain us. So you want to make sure you're setting that sense of progress, promise, and expectation for yourself as well. I promise that by 8 weeks from now, it will be done. Is it going to be great? That's not part of the promise. The promise is not that it be perfect or it be amazing. It will be done. The progress is going to be, every week I am getting a certain number of pages down that you are trying to write through the full scenes and just do a bad version of it. If it's not turning out that well, try not to skip stuff or to be adding in too many placeholders. But, here and there you can say, like, insert funny joke here if you really need to. But just try to do a bad version of it. It's fine. Then when those pages are done, that's your progress towards your goal. You have a very easy numerical count up. You know exactly how many pages you're going to want to be aiming for. 30 to 35 pages for a half hour. 60 to 65 pages for a full hour. And every week you will get progress towards that because you will just be writing and filling out those pages. And the payoff is, once it's done, you get to have that internal satisfaction. That's the thing, is that that payoff cycle, is part of the cycle, is a little bit broken here. Screenwriting is not where you want to go if you are looking for applause. It's incredibly difficult to get that sort of clear, consistent tone or that clear, consistent sound out of the instrument, so to speak. And your first couple scripts, chances are you will only get a slew of negative notes for them, regardless of how long you spent on them, regardless of how many times you've reworked it. Amount of time invested into a creative project is not a one-to-one ratio with the amount of reward you will get out of it, which is something that a lot of people kind of make this mistake of. I spent 5 years on the script, so by now it has to be amazing because I've put everything of myself into this. Well, that doesn't sound like someone who's treating this as a job. That sounds like someone who is treating this as a bucket list passion project, which is not the kind of people that are usually going to be consistently increasing their skills and incrementally getting better and better at this until they're ready to work at a professional level. If you're like, I just have one script in me and I've spent my whole life on it, you're not going to be incrementally improving in the way that you need to be. You're going to hit that point of diminishing returns and you're going to be overworking the dough at a certain stage, so you are really harming your own effort to finish this thing and to make it good and to become a TV writer, because that's more than anything what the class is about. It's about building the skills to eventually become a professional writer. So we're angling all this towards people who want to do this for a living, not for people who want to just do this as... I mean, you're still welcome, no matter your motivation for wanting to do this. You can want to do this as a hobby, or just for fun, or just to make shorts with your friends, or something like that. But the boot camps, and the whole point of the structure of a boot camp, is to put yourself in this more rigid framework. It's like, you've got to turn this in by this date, and by just consistently reading, writing, and finishing things, you will just be getting better. You don't backslide very easily doing that. I haven't really seen people get worse if they are writing, reading, and finishing things. So that's the overview of this, and that's the basics of what we're doing here. First half of the course is planning and outlining, making sure we know what happens on every page of the story. Then the second half is writing the story, using that detailed plan that you've spent that several weeks making to ensure that you're sticking to the initial goals that you had and the initial expectations that you've set up for yourself. And that's why we want to make sure that that logline is so solid, because it's the basis of everything you're doing for the next 6 weeks. Any questions before we continue? All right, let's keep going. So we will start with the overview of this class. So we will quickly review those ground rules. So hopefully by now, if you were in the previous class, you're starting to narrow down what is the show that I want to do. So you kind of have to know what is the pilot that you want to write for the next 6 weeks by the end of today, because after today, you're going to be cutting into your time to do all that other important stuff. So you got to just make some choices here, and we have to look at those essential I went over the basics, pick something fresh and new and exciting. That's like the essential version of this. But we will just glance at those other ground rules, and after that, we go into loglines, and we can post our loglines from last week pretty early. Don't do it just now, but like pretty early on in class we will, so we can get a sense of where everyone is and making sure that we are formatting these things correctly, and that they're improving as much as they need to be, and that they're as just polished as possible by the end of class today. We can revisit again briefly because I went over this last week, and you can always watch those recordings of those week 1 or week 0 classes that are on our social media, but we will review time slot and format, and TV genres, premise versus status quo, all those things that just you need to know what that means and how your show is working, and what the basics of how like continuity is going to be working in your show, for instance. And then, so yeah, we'll touch on those things, and I can answer questions to clarify anything there. But just because we went into them in such an in-depth, to such an in-depth level last week, to such a deep level. What am I saying? Then I don't want to spend as much time, and would rather focus it on the things that you are working on for class today. So hopefully you have something, at least, even if you're not 100% sure on this logline or any of these things, you can share it and get a sense of how to improve it and what's working and what's not and where you'll need to be for next week. So we will do quite a bit of that feedback. We'll look at how to fill out a sketchbook, which there's not a lot of rules for. It's really just kind of a very broad set of guidelines. We can talk about what showrunners are looking for from loglines or from pilots, although you're not going to get a showrunner to read your first probably 10 pilots that you write, so don't worry too much about that, and just you're going to focus more on the craft and the form of this before you are going to start worrying about how do I go pro, how do I get a job, how do I sell a show, how do I become Mr. Hollywood man. So you really just need to get these skills down, because until you do have these basics, and until you have a routine and a method and a process by which you can consistently and accurately and to a high level of quality be writing full-length TV pilots in just 6 to 8 weeks, until you can do that, don't worry about anything else. We will have lots of feedback, of course, and plenty of time for questions. So let's go in, and also just one last thing, I might want to just glance at the opening of a few pilots today, just to highlight a few points that I want to make. But that'll be sort of the unscheduled, loosey-goosey stuff that I don't always have in the outline. Anyway, let's look at just the basics again, and I won't reiterate every point from last week, but the essentials. Don't worry if this is good or not. Will it be good? Probably not. It's a first draft, and if it's in your first, I don't know, dozen scripts, it's no matter how many drafts you do, it still probably won't be that good. So, in fact, I even saw this very cynical post on this writing subreddit recently, and people post doom and gloom stuff on there all the time, but I just thought this one was kind of funny and just kind of put this in a nice way, even if I don't agree with everything in this exactly, but it was like somebody was saying something along the lines of, we see people who will write their one script then be like, okay, now how do I start copywriting this and getting this to agents and managers and stuff? And it's like, draw a cat, dude. Like, draw a cat. Go ahead. We assume you're not a professional artist here. Some of us might be professional artists and might be amazing at drawing cats. But assuming you're not, just draw a cat. Spend as much time as you want on it. Like, make it as good as possible. Then ask yourself, how much would that sell for? Google images that people have drawn of cats and hold yours up next to theirs and ask yourself, is yours significantly better than most of those? Because most of those aren't selling. People don't just buy any piece of art. Just because you spent a lot of time on it or care about it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean that it stands out from any of the other hundreds of thousands of people doing the same thing. People come on here and enter these early screenwriting communities and things, and they're like, I can't share because people are going to steal my work. It's like, dude, draw a cat. That's what we're seeing. Like, if you are really into the more screenwriting that you do and the more you work in the industry, the more it becomes easy to distinguish, oh, that's just a terribly drawn cat versus that's a masterpiece of a cat drawing. You get the idea. Like, I think just this principle of draw a cat is useful to think of just in terms of, if you're early on in this and you're wondering, how do I stack up? The answer is probably about as good as you drawing a picture of a cat versus Google image searches, a page full of them done by professionals. And that is the difference. It's like night and day. That's not to say you shouldn't try, or that you can't one day draw an amazing cat or whatever. But the point is, it's very silly to think that this is something that is easily gained or learned. This is something that requires years of mastery in order to accomplish. Not that Hollywood always is supporting or seems to believe that. But the point is, all of this is to say, your first script won't be that good. Just like your first cat will not be that good of a drawing. That's fine, and you just need to accept and understand that and realize that just because I spend time in something doesn't mean I should get more attached to it, because one of the main skills that we need to be working on as writers is the skill of letting go and moving So let's look at this process. Idea to first draft. You start with logline. We go to Sketchbook, story beat summary, scene cards, go to pages. It's the same thing every time. I do this no matter what I'm writing. For a short film, for a feature film, for a pilot, for a play, for a novel, literally whatever it is, I'm always doing these exact same things in this exact same method. So you can make your own method. Maybe you will really decide you like some of this and not some other parts, but you must at least have some kind of framework for what you're doing. You can't just wing it every single time, especially if you want to do this professionally. You want to work on a TV staff, you can't just be winging it. So let's start with logline. That's that one sentence expression, or perhaps up to 2 sentences, but usually it can be one. It's an expression of the premise of the show. It might be, or it will be one logline for the pilot itself, and one logline for the overall series that is going to be a little bit broader in scope. The sketchbook is going to be that collage of all your influences and ideas that you're just keeping all in one place. So you want to include any and everything there, and just use that to gather ideas. You're still gathering the berries and twigs or whatever. Next is your story beat summary. That's something you can also at least start writing in your sketchbook. I just use the sketchbook for early versions of all these documents, and then when they're getting to be pretty close to done, I'll copy and paste it into a new document and make that the official outline or something. But I almost always just start them in the sketchbook. How long are well, I'll get to sketchbooks later. But so after story beat summary, we expand that into scene cards, and that is going to be full paragraph for every scene. That's your outline that you're going to use to keep you on track through the whole process. And afterwards, we go to pages, which is a term that means you start actually formatting and writing the script in the proper notation and format and everything like that. You don't do that for quite a while. That's steps 1 through 4 are all getting your ducks in a row, so that by the time you're writing, it's like, well, the thing is, when you're actually when you go to pages, it's weird. It's a little bit more like being on stage than you would think, because you can do all the planning in the world, but then you finally get up there and you're like, line, and all of the framework, all of that pre-work that you've done, that's the directors or the stage manager sitting there with the book that can give you the line. That's what they're there for, and that is so essential to keeping track of where you need to be in the story, what's going to happen next, all these things. It's this is the stage manager on book for you. It's to make sure you don't get lost, and it might seem like over planning if you're like, I like to figure things out as I go, but that's really difficult to do in a medium where the specific lines and the page count, you're gonna scour this thing to take 1 or 2 lines out to make the pages line up properly and to make sure that something will fit into an act break or whatever. So it's incredibly difficult to discovery write, as we say, screenwriting material, just because it is so structured, such a short, comparatively, it's a very short document compared, if we put it up against a novel or something. It's meant to be read and experienced in one sitting, which is more than can be said for, many books are meant to be put down and read in many, many different sittings. But you get the idea. When we go to pages, it's like being on stage because you're relying on all your training and all the pre-work that you've done, all the sort of rehearsals. Yeah, think of the steps 1 through 4, that's the rehearsals and the reading the script a bunch of times and getting it, burning it into your memory. And then when you go to pages, it's like you're on stage. And now you have to just draw on the skills that you have and try your best to struggle to the end of the show. Okay, so quick review of ground rules. Pick that new, exciting, fresh idea. Don't spend more than 6 months on a script. If you are, there's a chance that, and giant life events aside, if you have a kid or something, then maybe you're spending longer than 6 months on a script. But you might just need to change up your process so that you are able to execute these ideas in, 6 to 10 weeks at the most. You got to write the bad pilots to get to the good ones. More ground rules. Don't do true stories, anthologies, soap operas, rewrites, or adaptations. This is a class for brand new original pilots. Probably don't do I'll just say don't do time travel. Just trust me. Probably don't do a historical unless you have some background in that, or you've done a lot of research or reading in that topic, or you just really, really, really want to. But just be aware that it almost always, a script that will require more research will take longer to write. Beware of difficult plot devices if you're new at writing, and there's certain things that are just very difficult to make work on the page or to make clear on the page, and the majority, if you don't pull some of these things off, like clones, parallel universe, excessive montages, flashbacks, or different timelines, if you're not experienced with those things and how to keep those things straight on the page visually, like this is your first 5 scripts or something like that, I'll say probably stay away from those, because you don't want the majority of the notes that you're getting to be, who is that? Wait, what's going on in this part? You want the notes to be on things that are everything else. We don't want to get all your feedback hung up on the difficulties of just understanding what's happening on the page. And these things, I promise you, are really difficult to keep track of, even for experienced writers. Clones, multiple copies of the same character, different universes, stuff like that, different timelines. Be careful with those things. I mean, they are tough to get right. And at the very, very minimum, you should read like 3 to 5 scripts that use a similar device. Professional scripts, beginning to end, that use a similar device to yours. Make sure to just be used to sharing your work with the class at all stages. Nobody's going to steal your stuff. Draw a cat, Use your real name as of the class that follows this one, or if this is your... I mean, if you're already a Scriptcamp member, you're probably already using a real name, so you should continue to do that. But just you should know, if you're new here, if you're continuing past the free classes, you should be using a real name, maybe your nickname or your middle name if you really want to, but you can't use screen names in the industry. Okay, so logline. Let's get ready to post our revised loglines from last week if you've got them, or ideas for your current loglines if you've not, if you're just joining now, or if you haven't gotten very far in them or something like that. So this is the entire story distilled down to a sentence or two. Meaning, well, maybe we shouldn't say it's the entire story, because you don't have to tell us what happens at the end. We don't have to tell us what happens at every point. This is the gist of the story. Let's say that. It's the gist of the story distilled down to a sentence or two. Though almost every time I see a 2-sentence one, I think it can be one. You want to imply a visual, primarily visual action, that we're going to be watching people do interesting stuff. There's going to be an inciting incident, which is the event that kicks the story off. We want to know who the main character is, and you should be picking a main character. What do they want? What's in their way? What happens if they fail? Those are the main questions to answer in a logline. So, feature loglines will emphasize that protagonist's goal, whereas TV, they can be a little bit of a broader look at the situation and the story world. Like, especially that series logline, that's going to be that it's a glimpse more at the story engine than anything else. What's a story engine? It's a kind of intangible but very important idea that there's things that will continue to generate interesting conflict in stories as your theoretical show, moves forward. Your theoretical show will not move forward. Do not be thinking, I'm going to get a show and I have to worry about what happens in Season 3 or Season 5 or Episode 2 even. You're not going to get that, but you want to sort of imply that it could have that. And that's like the weird thing about writing pilots, is that it's one of the only forms of, I guess if we call this its own form of writing, it's one of the only kinds where there must be no ending. In fact, there must be a sort of to be continued at the end, which, whether that is the expectation of to be continued along the linear story track that I have set up for them, or it could be to be continued in the sense of there will be many more of this type of adventure or this type of interesting conflict as we move forward. So either this was the first step of a longer journey, or it was an example of the type of journey we can expect from week to week. That's that difference between these two continuity styles of premise shows, which are like a long movie, and what I call, I don't know if there's an official name for them, but this is the best name I can think of for them, is status quo shows, which are things always return to. Status quo means the way things are, the way things were, so we reset continuity every week. That's the two formats. There's some blending between those sometimes. Don't worry too much about it. You're not going to get to blend those in the pilot. So, series logline, focus on interesting story world, interesting main character in it. Pilot logline, you got to focus more specifically on those things that we look for in features, like an emphasis on events, strong inciting incident, protagonist with clear focus on them who has a goal and something standing in their way, and some hook that makes us lean in and say, even as a fan of this genre, I am still interested and I must know more. Time slot and format, remember 30 minutes, 60 minutes. I realize there are more things out there in the world, but for the purposes of pilot writing for a professional portfolio, these are kind of your options. Half an hour usually are going to be comedic and highly episodic, but not always. There's so many exceptions that is no longer a rule, but in the past that has been true. 60 minutes, pretty much any genre except straight comedy. There is not an hour-long comedy genre that I'm aware of in the US, at least, but you can blend a comedic tone with anything. So you can just look at some examples of different runtimes and page lengths here, but it doesn't really matter. The point is 30 to 35 pages for half hour, 60 to 65 pages for a full hour. Okay, is anyone confused on their genre or is not sure what genre their show is or has any questions about genre just because I went over this last week? I don't want to hit all the same points again. Any questions or comments on the idea of genre? Asking, what are the expectations of my genre? Is anyone not clear on any element of this? Because this is super important.
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Is Californication considered a dark comedy?
I think so. I haven't actually seen it. I think it's a dramedy or a dark comedy, yeah, just based on
Okay.
what I have seen.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
yeah. probably someone
Like
who's
weeds.
experienced.
Weeds is stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and dark comedy is just a flavor of comedy. So if we look at the basics of what the characters are doing and the situations that they're in, we can say something like, Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's just straight comedy, but it just happens to have that darker kind of vibe to it, or that the darker tone. So you don't have to note out the tone to your show, but you should know what the genre is. Thanks for the question. Other questions about genre, or is anyone unclear on any element of this? Okay, everyone's super clear on genre. That's great, because we get actually a lot of, just at least in the last month or two, I've just been hearing a lot, I don't know what my genre is, and that's a problem. It's not really an option to say, I don't know what my genre is. That's sort of like you make a dish for someone, and someone's like, "Oh, what kind of food is it?" And you're like, "Oh," they will be suspicious of your dish if the chef cannot identify what, in fact, they were making. So you must know what your genre is. Okay, and don't pick more than two. Don't mash up more than two things, because we'll just get confused. Do two of the most. Okay, so loglines, we have to look at series and pilot. And I just want to look at them now. So go ahead and post loglines if you have one from last week that you have refined for today, or if you just post whatever you've got for your loglines. I will just frame it that way, and we'll take a look. I won't necessarily do feedback on them now, but I just want to gauge where we are at. So go ahead and use the chat. You can find it on the left side of your screen. It's called TV Pilot Class at the bottom of our discussion folder. So scroll on down there and paste some loglines in the chat for us whenever you guys are ready. Carmen says I'm observing. Okay, that's fine. You can just observe if you want. Thank you, Josh. Anyone else? Thank you, Logan. And thank you, Amanda. Awesome. Okay, so these look like these are well worked out at this point. I have given at least a little bit of feedback on these. I will be responding again, but thanks for working on these throughout the week. And everybody who is working on yours and is not sure, you can always be using these chat channels that we have. We have channels like Loglines, or you can post in the Bootcamp channel if you want more specialized feedback than that. And either Nacho or I will almost always get to these. We can't get every single post, every single comment every time, but we try our best to respond and help you so that by the time you get to the class, it is more polished. So thanks for posting these. Looks like I guess we have 3 worked out ones to look at later. And if you are still working on yours, you can just post ideas if you are only at that stage, and we're glad to look at that. Okay. So I am going to, let me just preview my next couple slides and see if there's anything I want to go over before I look at these specific ones. But remember, we're looking at series logline and pilot logline. So if you haven't done both of those, if you've only posted one or the other, try to come up with a version of the other one. Make sure we know if our show is going to be premise or status quo. I think I've already gone over the difference between this enough. Pilot logline looks a little more like a movie logline, so motivation, stakes, and urgency, front-loaded, protagonist really at the center of it. When inciting incident occurs, an adjective protagonist must conflict or else stakes. That's the basic format you can use if you aren't sure of where else to start. Okay. Any questions on this before we start to look at student loglines? And thank you for posting your logline here too, Mr. Slick. Any questions before we dive in?
I had a quick question.
Go ahead.
What exactly are comps again?
Sure. So comps are comparable titles. So they are movies that you're gonna, TV shows that you're gonna say, my show is like that show meets that show, and that's the way that we calibrate the audience's expectations early on for things like tone, So, if we say it's going to be like X-Files meets Scrubs, right? That's a very funny, fantastical version of that premise. Where if it's X-Files meets, I don't know, what's a super serious show? Mad Men or something like that. We're like, okay, that's more of a dense historical drama with sci-fi elements. So you're calibrating the audience's expectations by picking two different shows that sort of have the same feeling as yours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Does that have to be specifically like show comparisons, or can we like dip into other media like movies and video games and stuff?
Great question. At least one of them should be a show.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't be picking a video game and a movie, and then we're like, how is that a show? So at least one of them should be the format of the thing that you are comping. Some people will say they both have to be. I say you can be a little more. Come on. I mean, you can think of it as maybe the world of this with the tone and style of that, right? So if we're gonna say it's Office Space meets, I don't know, Doom, it's like a silly combo, but it's okay. That might be a show about the bureaucracy of hell, right? Or that might be about people the low-level employees of hell. And I could totally get that you're saying it's the world and sort of flavor of Doom, but in the style of the story of Office Space. So yeah, you can pick a different thing for your modifying genre, but at least one thing should be a show.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, let's take a look at the ones we have here. I'm going to mark them up, and we are going to give you notes and feedback so that you can... And we're doing this earlier than we normally do. Normally, the second half of the opening week is for this, but I'm going to give you this feedback now so that by the end of class, you can post your final version, and we can sign off on it, and I'll tell you you're good to go. It seems like the ones we have here are getting there, are pretty close, so none of these look like total disasters, don't worry. All right, let's start with our first one here. We're going to start with Josh with late fees. Okay, great. This is the video store one. Why don't you read this out for us?
Surely. All right. So late fees, comedy, 30-minute status quo format. My comps are Space, Cheers, and Clerks. Series Logline. In 2006, a video store employee and her staff must band together to keep the store in business through inspiration of their favorite movies. Pilot Logline. On her first day working at a video store, a nervous, movie-obsessed young woman utilizes the plot of Rear Window to solve who has been shoplifting movies.
All right, awesome. You've gotten a lot more specific with this one. I think you've done a few revisions of this, which is great. I want to look at it one more time because I think you're getting there. First of all, I would just pick two comps. Try not to do three.
Sure.
If this is gonna be is this multicam or single cam?
I don't know. I'm thinking multicam.
Okay, if it's gonna be multicam, then Cheers is a better idea than Clerks because Cheers is a multicam show. So
Yeah.
Try not to mix up your audience like that. That's how you can set that expectation. One of those ways you can set the temperature early is by letting us know the style of show it's going to be. So yeah, if it's multicam, pick a multicam comp.
Yeah, I like the nerdiness of Space and like the day-to-day of Cheers.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah, I love Space. Space is an amazing show.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look again. Okay, so in 2006, great, we're setting the era. A video store employee and her staff must band together to keep the store in business through inspiration of their favorite movies. I think I see what you're saying. So each episode is going to be they have to keep a struggling business afloat, taking inspiration from the plot of a movie. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. Through inspiration, just the word itself might sort of be throwing me off there. Taking inspiration from there. Yeah. Taking inspiration from, I think, makes sense. And then the last thing, instead of saying in 2006, I mean, I like that you've given us that year, but you might just want to clarify in the dying era of VHS or something like that. You see, or maybe it's not even VHS, but just clarify why you are calling out that era, and that's going to be setting up the story engine because you're saying there's always going to be something that is threatening to take down Blockbuster or whatever it is, right?
Okay, cool.
So yeah, you can use that to sort of amp up the story engine by highlighting the conflict or the repeated conflict. Go ahead.
Gotcha. Would something, because I'll just putting it out there, something to the effect of in the early 2000s?
I think we get it.
That's
I mean,
still
it's still sort of still a little bit of the same thing. I think the most important thing is that this is an era where video stores are dying and that the format is fading out. So you might just want to call that out. I mean, remember also that if you're trying to get professional reads on a TV show or a feature, your reader might be a 19-year-old intern.
That is accurate, yes.
Yeah, and if they're 19-year-olds, how old were they when this was going on? 4? So they might need that context. It might be a little silly to say, the kids might not know, but the kids might not know.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, pilot logline. On her first day working at a video store, a nervous, movie-obsessed young woman utilizes the plot of Rear Window. She doesn't really utilize the plot of Rear Window. She's using the tactics of the main character, I would guess. But she takes inspiration from the plot of Rear Window to solve who has been shoplifting movies. You mean to find a movie thief or something like that, I think is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to use the word shoplifting because that's, a typical a video store problem.
Yeah, so maybe something like to track down a shoplifter. I mean,
I like that.
Something like, I mean, I don't think they're tracking them down necessarily, but to catch a shoplifter, something like that. Catch a shoplifter. I think that's a good idea. I mean, so Rear Window is going to be, that's your guy in a wheelchair sitting at his window looking out at all his various neighbors, and he sees a crime happen across the street, and now he's trying to prove that guy is a murderer across the street, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So is it that there's a bunch of buildings across the way that we think one of the people who lives there is the shoplifter?
My thought so far is that she's using the security camera footage in that same way, where they have all these regular customers, much like he has all of his people in the apartment complex.
Yeah. And
she's watching them, and they all have kind of similar, in Rear Window, he refers to them by different names, like Miss Torso, and other things. And then there's, what she thinks is going to be the husband and wife, the miserable husband and wife. And she's going to pinpoint the husband because that's what it was in Rear Window,
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. This sounds like a great idea. I mean, and then is the conceit of the show that every episode will sort of be the genre of that thing. So this episode is going to have like a Hitchcock vibe throughout.
Yeah, I think so. But I also, I want to. This is the pilot. I want to introduce some of these, some of the regular characters, and the script I read this week, which I know we're not necessarily there yet, but was Abbott Elementary. Abbott Elementary did a really good job of introducing all of these characters and this setting within the cold open even.
Right.
And I definitely want to do that, but I definitely want something of a Hitchcock vibe, something of a Rear Window vibe with specific references to it in a more comedic way.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally with you. Yeah.
At the end of Rear Window, I apologize for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Spoiler warning has expired on that one, I think.
1954.
Yeah, come on.
He utilizes Jimmy Stewart utilizes a flashbulb to try to slow down who ends up being the killer, and I feel like she would be inspired to do the same thing. And while she's doing it, that the actual real shoplifter is getting away with it. Mm-hmm. So playing with what happens in Rear Window in a fun way, but also having kind of, writing in some Hitchcockian things as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great gimmick. I'm totally into this. This is very much sort of, Spaced, you mentioned. Spaced kind of does this where they'll have an episode that's kind of like the zombie episode, right? Or Community is another show that does this, and they'll do one that's like, this is like sort of their Western episode, or this is kind of the, it's like we're finding that mini genre on an episode-by-episode basis, which makes perfect sense and feels very organic with your world because they work at a video store, which is full of different stories like this. So I think it's a great premise, and I think that you just make these little minor adjustments, and you totally have the green stamp already.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Connor.
Thanks for this, and I will say this is the benefit of you go to week 0, you get that early feedback, right, and then you work on it throughout the week and improve it more. You just end up with something that is like probably more ready to go once the class starts. So I think you're almost there already.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Let's move on. Let's go to Logan. Are you able to talk, Logan?
Yeah, I can talk.
Okay, don't force yourself if it'll harm your body too much. But you want to read this out for us?
Sure. Just the logline, or I
Well,
guess
the whole thing.
yeah. So title: Heirs of the Templar. Genre: fantasy adventure. TV pilot premise. I think hour, but I'm like not entirely sure about that actually.
You do half hour for this? Maybe. I think I'll just like see based on like kind of the events in my head which one, like based on the time. Okay.
It'll be pretty obvious. Like, oh, is this like, do I need an hour or?
Yes.
30
Yes,
minutes?
you do. I'm just gonna spoil it and say you probably do, but that's okay. I mean, there are half-hour fantasy adventure type shows. We have your, what do you call it, your Avatar, or your you know, like I mean, they're going to be usually more lower age focused for the most part, but there's other stuff. Just go ahead.
All right. So the logline. So when a zealot child's father is killed during an insurgency, his father entrusts him with 2 magical gauntlets that grant telekinesis only when wielded together and bind to a user until death. Now the boy must kill the advisor who betrayed the nation to appease the gods who whisper to those who wield their artifacts.
Whoa. Okay, thanks for that. Go ahead and read the series logline.
Okay. A zealot child must train and find magical relics that create different unique powers upon combination in a vast kingdom with the help of a wealthy former adventurer, an idealistic knight, a philosophic jester, and the gods who possess the relics so he can save his brother from the utilitarian ruler who desires all the magical artifacts in the realm to protect against invaders. Sorry, I think I was. This is like a former version, and like I kind of edited, forgot about the series one.
That's
I'm
okay.
basically taking out the brother. That's like the only difference.
Take out the brother.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's you can revise it if you want to, but let's just break this apart. So, heirs of the Templar. What does that mean?
Oh, it's just like the Templar are the like former race, kind of like, have you ever played Halo?
Yep.
Like the Forerunners, it's like that equivalent, but they're not quite as as different in technology, because it's more like this is like medieval fantasy, right?
Right.
With like, you know, but it's like that kind of equivalent. It's like a race that's beyond the people in the modern world that like the people in the modern world kind of revere but don't really understand. That's kind of the best.
Often these are like elves or something in many different types of fantasy.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is, they're like kind of gone. You know, like people don't really know.
Are often also kind of gone, depending on the or what about where are all the dwarves in Skyrim? How about that?
Yeah.
Let's take a look. So when a zealot child, it's a weird. That's like saying a chef child. It's like a zealous child, I think is what you mean to say. A zealous child's father is killed during an insurgency. Okay, I'm not sure if you mean by the insurgents or he is an insurgent and he is killed by the occupying force. Which one do you mean?
He's killed by the occupying force.
Okay. So his father is like a rebel and an insurgent, I guess you're sort of saying. His father entrusts him with 2 magical gauntlets that grant telekinesis only when wielded together and bind to a user until death. So both of these, I don't think any reasonable person could say in one breath of air, especially the series logline. And we need to just be reducing words from these until this is something that is expressible in just one easy, breathable sentence. So we have too much information in both of these. 2 magical gauntlets that grant telekinesis only when wielded together and bind to a user until death. Why do we need to know all that in the pilot logline, especially? I'm not sure that we would. 2 magical gauntlets that grant telekinesis. Okay, that's probably all we need to know. Now the boy must kill the advisor who betrayed the nation. What? not the guy who murdered his father or something? This is kind of abstract to me. What do you mean?
Like his father is like a member of like the king's guard before, so basically the advisor is like the one who is most like, I guess, responsible for his death, because he like kind of he betrayed the king and basically allowed like insurgents to invade. Like he was helping like rebels basically.
But your main character is one of those rebels, but his father. I'm sorry,
No.
you're saying is one of them, right?
No, he's not.
Oh, I thought we just
He's like,
established that he was.
there's like the king, and he's one of his guards, and then the rebels, and then the rebels came and like took over the castle and like the important government buildings basically. So he's not on the rebel side.
Okay, I think we just the very basics of this we might have to go over again, but this is just a sign a little bit that this is a little bit too complicated, just as of the beginning, or maybe just the way that you're framing this is not connecting quite as much as it needs to. The boy must kill the advisor who betrayed the nation. I don't understand the connection of that to the first sentence. Do you see what I mean? Because I never understood there was an advisor who caused this thing to happen. So you probably want to frame this more in terms of your main character. Now the boy has to, and I mean, saying he must do that is already in question, because why must he? But we could sort of imagine that maybe if he doesn't do this, then the evil overlord will come for him next or something like that. But instead of saying betrayed the nation to appease the gods who whispered to those, like, we don't even care about those things. You must kill the advisor who, be more direct and draw connection to main character. The advisor who betrayed them, or something like that, is what we're looking for. Question mark? Something like that. The more you get into the politics of what's going on, like, the less interested we will be, especially in a logline, because we need to focus on the emotionality and the drama of what's going on. And politics and drama often coincide, but they are not, by definition, the same thing. We don't really care about the rationale, behind the political machinations and decisions being made here. We care about, there's this kid, and his father was betrayed, and now he's hunting down the guy that betrayed his father. That's like simple, and rooted in emotion that is easy to understand, and it's not relying on all this explanation of the world. So I would find that really direct connection. Why is he hunting this villain down, and why does he have to do it? I'm assuming you're sort of saying because if he doesn't, then they will hunt him down next, perhaps, but I'm not sure exactly if that's the case or not. So highlight stakes and keep them personal and easy to understand. That's going to be my main big note here.
Could I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like what I was trying to get through is like, since the adjective is zealous, and like I meant it in like the religious sense, and that's why it's like gods are what he wants. Because like when he gets the gauntlets, then he can, like, everyone who has the artifacts can hear what they think are gods, and it's like ambiguous whether they are or not. But he is of that religion, so he believes in them. So that's why it's like kind of linked to his motivation.
What is it's your world, but it's so complicated to convey in a logline. Are the gods real in your world, or are they not? You're saying they actually are taking direct action in the material world, but even though that's the case, people aren't sure if it's them or not? What?
Oh, no, I mean, like, it's ambiguous for the audience whether they're like gods or like ghosts, like, you know what I mean? It could be anything. But for him, it is like definitely God talking to him.
It's just one god? There's like a monotheistic religion here, and it's real?
No, it's like polytheistic, but it's just like he's sure that.
Stay away from the god stuff. It's not. I don't think it's helping. I think it's only raising questions that you will need a full hour of a TV to fully like use all that stuff. You need to be cutting stuff away. This is why fantasy's so hard to do in movies and TV, and it's why original fantasy does not get made in movies or TV. It just does not, unless you're Guillermo del Toro. I would leave all the religion stuff out. It's just raising too many questions, and it doesn't seem rooted to It doesn't seem rooted strongly enough to what's going on with the character. I understand you're sort of saying you have chosen Zealous for a reason, and I might be able to see that, but I don't know how the gods in your world work. So the more you talk about them, the more I'm just gonna be like scratching my head trying to figure out what's going on in the show. Keep it simple.
I think maybe it's more like kind of like a genie is like a better way to think of it. Like the relationship will be like Aladdin and sorry, I forgot his name, but you know what I mean, correct? It's just about in the pilot at least what matters is his relationship between himself and the like kind of god, ghostly force, whatever, it doesn't matter. But
is that the central relationship of the show?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, you need to front load that then. Don't. And if that's the case, if it's like a character, the gauntlets are like a character.
Yeah. That's kind of the.
Okay. Yeah. You totally
he sees it as a god, so he like will listen to whatever it says, and that's kind of.
So this is let's go back to the scratch board a little bit and say something like a whatever zealous young boy must team up with the possessed gauntlets or haunted, possessed, whatever the word is, magic, or let's say the godlike spirit in his dying father's gauntlets, whatever, to take down the whatever politician, king, something that betrayed them. That's what you want for this. Something like that. Make sense? So like if that's the hook, because the central relationship then becomes the hook very easily. So if you frame it as it's gonna be this kid and these two gauntlets that give him magic but also have a personality and like a will of their own, and they're like intelligent objects basically for the purposes of the story, though it might be gods in them or whatever is causing it. That's the hook of the show. It's the kid and these gauntlets against this evil kingdom. Whatever. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Series logline is way too long and confusing. I would probably scrap this one, and now that you have that, try again with the series logline, and I will come back to it by the end of class. Sound good?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so I'll just highlight a thing to look out for. Anytime you have a bunch of constructions in a row that are all like, where is it? He can save his brother from the utilitarian ruler who desires all the magical artifacts in the realm to protect against invaders. Never mind, I don't have a specific thing to look at here, but just run-on sentence is the main issue. So re-examine that. We'll come back and check in by the end of class. Thanks, Logan. All right, we have two more to go through, and then we will have a little more of this lecture time, and we might look at the beginning of a couple pilots, and then by the end, if you have been given notes to revise, then post it again, and we'll give you that, gold star, green stamp, whatever it's called. All right, Amanda.
All right. I have a little bit of the run-on stuff, but we've established that at least I'm moving in the right direction with this series. So it's called Violet's Blue. The main character is named Violet. Half-hour dramedy comps are Weeds and Californication. So the series logline is, and the pilot needs a lot of work, but I think you'll get the gist of it. Series is, in attempt to come up with the money for her sister's life-saving surgery, a newbie writer turns to a family friend, an eccentric Hollywood playwright, to help her sell her ideas. And then this is the part where it's just way too many words. I know you'll be able to fix this. But her blinding naivete, reckless risk-taking, and undiagnosed mental illness may make her the one needing the saving. It's a convoluted way of saying her own foibles cause her to go downhill,
It's not that convoluted.
So
this is not
okay.
that at all. This is not
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
This isn't
Okay.
even a significant run-on.
Oh, okay, good.
But I might say something like, in attempt to come up with the money, we can just probably say to raise the money. Something like that.
Okay.
To
Yeah.
just, combine and just streamline the words a little bit.
Yeah.
She's not really raising money. Usually suggests charity though, so she's not really trying to raise it. She's trying to earn it, to earn them, something like that. Just there's one word you can put there that will
Right. I mean, you could even say to fund her sister's life-saving surgery.
Oh god,
Like,
yeah.
but
I mean, is
not.
this the only way someone's gonna fund it? Is she gonna die if she doesn't do this?
It's not well. So it'll be one of those little bit of false starts where, like, she goes, it's not as urgent as we think, but in the beginning we think it is.
Okay.
But it's like it's a life, yes, long-term sort of life-changing surgery. To
Yeah, to help her sell her ideas. But her
yeah, I know that.
I would say no. I mean, it makes sense. I can see someone who just moved to Hollywood, perhaps thinking that teaming up with a playwright is a good way to sell a show. Perhaps. I mean, the idea
It's
of
her
a
only
Hollywood
connection.
playwright in
Yeah.
the first place feels like it's from the 1930s. I mean,
Mhm.
a Hollywood playwright
It
is
is
not really a thing anymore.
Right.
You
But
could
I-
sort of
but
say
it's
Go ahead.
Right, but somebody who came somebody who came to Hollywood in the 70s and basically sold one of their first scripts. So they're out of touch with how the industry works,
Sure.
but they've been kind of making, they established a name early on. They're playing in a different game, and their expectations are also a little yeah,
Yeah, it's like that
so
sort of Sunset Boulevard kind of vibe to it. So I think this
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is working fine. To help, but her blinding naivete, reckless risk taking, and undiagnosed mental illness may make her the one that needs saving, not needing saving. That's sort of two participles
Thank you.
in a row. Yeah. That
Okay.
needs
Yeah.
saving. Make her the one that needs it. I think that works pretty well. I mean, maybe you could take one of those three things out in that list, but this is not a run-on anymore. I'm pretty much with
Okay.
you. I like the
Okay.
character's motivation, and you sort of do explain in the text that this is not entirely a super well thought out plan, which does help me understand, okay, the writer doesn't think the world works this way, but the character's going to be attempting to approach this problem this way. So, sure, I could see this.
Yeah.
A writer
Yeah.
tries to, team, so this is a team up buddy type of setup, which is great to help her sell her ideas. Yeah, that's all great. Okay, so I think you're pretty much actually just those couple tiny adjustments, and you're there on the series logline. Let me check the
Okay, good.
pilot.
Okay, so now I'll read the pilot, and it's a little, so I'm kind of debating on two what do you call it, triggers. So one of them, yeah, insight. So after listen, so she's gonna get like a call from her mom about her sister. So there's gonna be this, like she's back in rehab or with a health issue in the hospital again, and that'll be kind of the crisis, but this sort of inspiration. So after listening to a hypnotic motivational podcast about, all the toxic positivity and all that shit. So about the law of attraction and following one's dreams, like just gets you in this delusional state. A 30-something office worker quits her day job and moves to Hollywood, thinking, she's going to quickly sell a show to fund her sister's life-saving surgery. But the other option, I like the podcast thing, but it could also be, I thought it could be a misunderstanding by her playwright friend who's like, oh yeah, he thinks that she's already written something, or misunderstands that, and she hasn't actually written anything yet. And so she gets there and he's like, all right, what do you got? And she's like, nothing.
Okay.
Another
go ahead.
okay, one other thing. So I think there'll be a couple obviously that'll, he thinks she's further along than she is when she gets there, and then she winds up in a really horrible roommate situation. She realizes, oh shit, I need more time. I should get my day job back, but she can't get it back now, so she's burned that bridge. So then there's just like, not only is she not going to be able to make a bunch of money to help fund her sister's surgery right away, but now she doesn't even have the old security to support herself. Mm-hmm. So she kind of lands in that nightmare situation by the end of the show.
She should sign up for Scriptcamp. I mean, I don't know what she's doing.
Yes, exactly. If she had signed up for Scriptcamp right when she got here, it would have helped a lot.
Right? Yeah, no plot if you sign up for Scriptcamp. It's too easy this way. Okay, so my thought is, the podcast stuff is not relevant for your pilot logline. You don't even mention the sister getting into an accident, or what is it that happens to the sister?
She winds up in the hospital.
But is it
Yeah,
an
I know. I
actual
need to
disease
add
or
that
an
there
accident, or
too.
what is it that actually happens?
So, following her sister's recent hospitalization, maybe, or something.
But what happens to her? Why is she in the hospital?
She gets alcohol poisoning, and she's in like a diabetic coma.
Oh, okay. I'm just asking because I was thinking maybe it's important, but it doesn't sound like it might be. I mean, is that like something your main character is also struggling with? Oh, I think we lost you. Are you there, Meta? Did I lose my connection? Can you guys still hear me?
Loud and
I can hear you.
Okay. Amanda, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear you now. Yep. So my question
Okay.
was that something is alcohol something that your main character is struggling with as well?
No.
Okay, then it doesn't read to me as super important how she actually had this, how she actually is being hospitalized. But the important part is the inciting incident of this is not I listened to a podcast. The inciting incident
Right.
is my sister was hospitalized.
Right.
Yeah. So after her sister XXX hospitalized, 30-something office worker quits her day job, moves to Hollywood, and hopes she can quickly sell a show. A very naive hope to fund a life-saving surgery. But she immediately starts to regret the decision when she lands in a nightmare roommate situation. Okay. But we do meet the central relationship, the playwright, in the pilot, don't we?
Yes, and that's it. Yeah. So I mean, I think I would say okay. After her sister is hospitalized, a 30-something quits her day job, and moves to Hollywood with
her family. Something is she moving in with the family friend in Hollywood or something like that? Oh no.
She
I
moves
guess she
to
can't be.
Hollywood
Yeah.
under the encouragement. I would say she moves to Hollywood under the encouragement of her eccentric Hollywood playwright friend. That's too many words. You know, with the
Oh, do they have a previous relationship or don't they?
yes. Yeah, I've decided it's a family friend that she reaches out to after her sister's sick, and then he's like, "Oh, you're writing children's stories? Those can get adapted to it, that can be adapted to a TV show." And then, she's like, and then she listens to the podcast about following your dreams, and you can make it real, and there's no limits. And then she does then she moves prematurely.
I don't think it's a huge deal. I think that I'm just looking at the series and pilot loglines now, and my assumption would be that this will still happen in the pilot, and this will be like sort of her way of resolving or addressing the roommate situation, perhaps, is that she will, with this team, because like you're setting up, this is the situation of the week in a half-hour show like this.
Right.
Actually, is this status quo or is this premise?
It's premise.
Premise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Even half-hour premise show, or even half-hour premise shows still sometimes have that thing of the week kind of vibe to them a little bit, and at least we have the idea of there's going to be some kind of problem every week, and then there'll be an issue of how does she make money each in the meantime, and then roommate stuff, her latest unrealistic expectation, each week sabotaging efforts. Okay, so my expectation would be that she's going to work together with this playwright to somehow resolve that roommate situation, whatever that means.
Okay, yeah.
If that's not the case, you might want to adjust what's the log lines, but that is just my assumption looking at this. And if that is if that is how it's going to play out, I don't think you need to mention the playwright in the pilot log line because you do clearly outline it in the series. So I think you're looking at this is pretty good, in pretty good shape.
Okay. I'll work on that a little bit before the end of class today.
Great, awesome. And you've clearly put in a couple drafts of this and have thought this through, so that all really helps to move things in the right direction. I think you're like 90% there.
Cool. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Questions on this?
I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks for this, Amanda. We have one more, and then we will go to more lecture for a bit, and we'll just double check those I'm not going to do a full review, but I'll just read through and give you that quick advice that by the end. So let's look at Dead Mall. Are you here, Mr. Slick?
Yeah.
All right. Can you read this out for us, please?
Sure. So, Dead Mall is the title. The genre is a dark comedy slash urban fantasy. It's a half-hour animated TV pilot. It's now that I know what the comps are, I'd say it's probably like Superstore meets Undertale.
Okay.
Those.
Yeah. Very unique combination.
Yeah. So the series logline: a college student takes a job at an abandoned mall that has been taken over by monsters and must adjust to his new environment and coworkers while trying not to die.
Okay. Is that's the series logline?
Series logline, yeah.
Series. Okay. So I see why now you were asking, can I comp something else? And just the thing is, some people will know Undertale and some people won't. It's an indie game. It's not. I mean, if you were comping Halo, I think it would be easier to assume people would know what you meant. Whereas I'm gonna guess maybe 1 of 4 people will know what Undertale is or what that actually implies for it. So it's not to say you can't ever use these things, but just be aware of, is the reader gonna know what that is? So if you can think of something perhaps a little more mainstream, then that conveys the same idea, then consider what that might be. I would mostly look at TV shows. There's lots of shows of this sort of tone on like Adult Swim or Comedy Central. We have shows like Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell, which I think that was on Adult Swim or something like that. And then we have, Ugly Americans might be another one to look at, which I think was on Comedy Central. It was an animated sort of magical realism kind of show like this. So yeah, maybe just consider a different comp for the second one.
Okay.
A college student takes a job at an abandoned mall that has been taken over by monsters. Meaning, what does it mean, taken over by monsters? The monsters are running the mall, or they are? How do you take over a mall that's non-functional?
The way I have it is like, I don't want to get too much into like lore and backstory now, but it's the way I see it, like the mall is abandoned, like it's not used by humans anymore. So the way I have is that monsters from like history and mythology and stuff have taken it over from the past, turning it into a modern day place for monsters to work and shop, if that makes sense.
Oh, so they want to live there. They've taken. It's not that they have taken over it. They've taken shelter or sanctuary there. Is that what you're saying?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, that makes a little more sense to me. The monsters that occupy / habitate might not be the right word, but take shelter, sanctuary, something like that. Then that way I understand why they are there, and also the dynamic of what the relationships might be a little bit more. So I think we're sort of saying that these are going to be somewhat sympathetic monsters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And he must adjust to his new environment and coworkers while trying not to die. And why doesn't he just quit or leave?
I have my main character out to be a type of guy who sort of just is, like very optimistic. He goes with the flow, and like I mentioned later that he's a bit of a geeky guy, so he's sort of like, he's into all the monster stuff. He's enjoying his time there, and even though he's like close to death every time, he's a very like optimistic guy who always wants to do his best. He puts his all into everything he does, even if that's working in such a dangerous environment.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I would maybe just describe the main character a little bit more then, because you have just college student as his only description, and that doesn't actually imply any kind of personality. Anyone can be a college student, can't they? So if you're saying he's sort of blindly optimistic or something like that, like if you watch the show Smiling Friends, which was on, I think, Adult Swim, and is now on HBO, the main character sort of has this vibe of, I always want to do the right thing. I'm always going to try my best no matter what happens, like that sort of guy. Then that's all you really need. I mean, there doesn't have to be a ton of logic in a cartoon as to why he's continuing to work at the Monster Mall, but that was just my first question. I was like, oh, most people would quit if their life was in danger at their job. So you might just need a little something that tells us why he's doing this and just give us a better sense of who your main character is as a person, because this is a big part of the hook of shows is interesting characters in an interesting world. You have an interesting world, so now we just want a sense of who the main character is. And then did you have a pilot logline too?
Yeah, the Pilot Logline, I'm still working this. This
There it
one's not
is.
as good.
Yeah, go ahead.
A dorky college student starts his first day on a job at a mall for monsters and tries to make friends and not die on his first day.
Okay, so for this one, for the pilot logline, you're just going to want to be more specific. So tries to make friends. So you would say something like, he gets his first job is he goes on patrol with a weird, milkman, whatever it is. Like, you want to just be more specific. So when on Jeff's first day, he gets the job. He has to clear all the demons out of the Hot Topic. See what I mean? And then, so just tell us what the actual situation. You're just describing the type of situation, whereas you need to tell us what the actual situation is. Make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. So instead of describing type of situation, tell us exactly what it is. Okay. So yeah, that one, back to the drawing board just a little bit on the pilot logline, but I really do like the setup, and this is unique and sounds funny, and great title and good sort of high concept stuff here. I would assume if it was called Dead Mall that it was mostly occupied by undead creatures like zombies and werewolves, werewolves aren't undead, but zombies and vampires and stuff. Is it that kind of monsters, or is it just kind of a grab bag from all of folklore?
It's more of a grab bag from like a lot of folklore. Yeah, it's like there's things. I don't want to dip too much into like human based monsters because it's meant to be more like mythical things, but I am possibly considering having vampires and werewolves and stuff in there. Probably not zombies, but I'm still world building on that a little.
It's a fantasy cartoon. You can't rule too much stuff out early on. This sounds good. I'm pretty into this, and just take another crack at that pilot logline and give us some more specifics, and I think you'll be good to go.
Okay.
Questions on this? Okay, if there's no questions, thank you for this. We will move on to our next bit here. Looks like we have some more folks who have perhaps joined since starting. Thank you for being with us. If you're just joining us, we are a little more than halfway through this intro class to our 6-week TV writing program here. This is a boot camp where you're going to write a whole pilot in just 6 weeks. We just reviewed all our student loglines from last time, and before the end of class, we're going to just double check those final versions of these. So I'll give the last 10 minutes for that. So for the next half hour or so, I just want to go over some more stuff, some more pilot stuff. So we did logline feedback. After hearing these, I hope everyone is having a clearer picture of how to revise this and what to be looking for. Specificity and clarity and simplicity, those are all going to be at the heart of this, and throughout the weeks, like, you don't have to just work on these on the session days. You can be submitting to our feedback channels and posting in the chat for the bootcamp and getting feedback like several of these students here have, and then that will help you move forward, and attending labs and all these other things will just give you that boost that you need. So any questions before I move on? All right, let's keep going. So, loglines, super important. That's most of what we're doing. Got to make sure your logline's really good. Sketchbook is going to be what you fill out next, which are there right and wrong things to include in here? No, everything goes in here. This is one document that it's going to fix this problem of you're writing sticky notes all over your house or whatever it is. You just want to aggregate and consolidate all these notes. And all this research and all this brainstorming, this is just a place for brainstorming, and whether you're going to do those little bubble word webs or whatever, like whatever diagramming you want to use, if that's helpful for you, you can do that all here. I will, for most of my projects, will write about 10 to 15 pages of Sketchbook before I am getting started on the outlining. For a book and for a novel, my outlines or my sketchbooks are more like 35 to 50 pages at the start, because I will usually have several versions of the cards, or like not the cards, but several versions of just that early story beats outline, half formed in various, Frankenstein states. But and also just lots more. I usually write sci-fi and fantasy novels too, so there's much more rules and world building that you have to establish. And if you're writing books, and we'll get more into this later, but it can be helpful. You don't have to do this for a show or a movie usually, but to have that whole separate document of just a world building file, we'll get more into that in the sci-fi class that's coming up. Generally, you don't have to do that for movies and TV. The point is, the sketchbook is that main document that you're putting everything in, collecting all your notes and story ideas, and just whatever you thought was cool, whatever gravitated you towards this idea in the first place, just whatever you think is awesome. Like, you should make a list of just little moments that you think could be awesome in that genre, no matter how they're going to fit into the final product. Unless you can come up with the cool ingredients, then you're never going to get to those ingredients. So you should have a sense of why you like this genre and what you think is cool in it, and maybe just write out some ideas for sorts of stuff that could happen in something like this. So just think of awesome moments completely free of context. What about these blockbuster moments? You always be thinking, how am I going to get 2 or 3 really memorable, kind of very visual and evocative and cool moments? Like, usually those moments are going to be best if they are fulfillment of some kind of promise, or they are they represent your character having some kind of victory over an obstacle in front of them. It doesn't always have to be that. A big tragic moment can be a sort of blockbuster moment too. I mean, just look at Game of Thrones. Like, almost all of its big blockbuster moments are incredibly tragic and horrible, and not really like your character flies on a dragon or whatever for the first time. They don't have to be that at all. These are those moments that will stand out and linger in the audience's mind and make them go, wow, that was cool. So your idea of cool and the idea of something awesome the idea of fun works different ways in different genres, and different genres are fun in different fashions. So you should be familiar with your genre enough to know what has been done in it, what I think is cool in it, and what I want to be working up to. Those moments that will make everything that we were just doing worth it. So be thinking of those cool moments, not just like ideas for characters and stuff, but although you should be able to write out like a little mini cast list probably with a couple details about everyone as much as they're going to matter. And just include links and videos and photos and whatever else is just going to continue to inspire and inform the rest of the construction of this story. So make that now. If you've not already made the sketchbook, now is the time to make it. It's just a blank Google Doc. That's it. There's nothing fancy about it, but just keep putting down dialogue, scenes, locations, characters, and putting everything on the page. We don't need to look at sketchbooks right now. I think you guys get the idea. Does anyone have any questions about what goes in a sketchbook or how to make it or what to do with this? Okay, let's keep going. So what showrunners are looking for, gonna spend like a minute on this max, and I sort of just want to change the definition of this to what are people who might read your script looking for, because is that going to be a showrunner for your first 10 years of doing this? No. People who are reading scripts, though, and people who are professionally reading, and maybe even just some think of other members of the server who are looking to swap scripts, something like that. Just what are readers looking for, and what are experienced readers looking for is what we're going to be talking about. So if you get hundreds of sample scripts to read, and you can't read all of them or most of them, or imagine you get a stack of loglines, you get 50 loglines, and you only have time to read 3 of those scripts, you must make sure that your story is standing out with some kind of clear hook. And it means that once you get started, you have only a few pages to catch their attention and to make it feel like you know what you're doing, and we've set up the world, and we understand the basics of what's going on here. I do want to highlight some points there, but first I will just say, make a good first impression, make sure it's formatted correctly. If it's not formatted, there is only one way to format movies and TV shows. There are not alternate fonts or alternate layouts or things. It's not a great place to be experimental in the format itself. You've got to sort of make sure you look like you know what you're doing. You want to basically have something original that stands out. I mean, originality is not going to be the main goal for this bootcamp, but it is what showrunners are looking for, so I'll at least tell you that we want to find something that feels like we haven't seen it a million times before, ideally. You don't want to just be basing your thing. You don't want to just be like, say, it's like Friends meets The Office. Like, don't just pick the most popular things and then base all of why someone should read it on, well, it's like that. You should find a way to stand out, and your logline itself should make it clear, it's going to deliver the thrills and the excitement and the interesting moments of whatever genre I want, but it will give me something that I am excited by. It should be easy to read. You should be light on your words and not be giving us these huge blocks of text that make it seem like you just aren't respecting the reader's time and don't know what you're doing. So be using a lot of white space on the page whenever possible. Make sure that you are using these principles of clarity, brevity, and voice on every single line in that order. Clarity first, brevity second, voice third. but you should have your voice stand out a little bit if you can, and you want to be showing off whatever it is you can do on the page, whether you're funny or you're really good at writing scary imagery. Whatever it is that your skills are should be front-loaded and really clear. Don't introduce 10 main characters on page 1. You don't want to jump around to 5 different timelines on page 1. Don't make your reading your script a chore. Make sure you're setting up any rules or expectations early on. Maybe just have a line at the top or a page that comes before it that says, you know, all spoken dialogue in this show will be in Romanian, or whatever it is. That, like, we just want to make sure that these things are as clear as possible on the page from page 1. So those are just some of the essentials: originality, clarity, ease of the read, standing out, and a clear hook. And all of these things are going to come into play in the logline or just the title, logline, and genre. If that stuff's not clear, you're not getting to the next stage. So it's like all these things have to be as clear as possible from one moment to the next. But moreover, once you get to the actual script itself, you have just a few pages to set up. Who is the main character? What is the world that they're in? What is the general gist of the conflicts in this show going to revolve around? And what is unique about this world? Let's look at the opening scene of Mayor of Kingstown by Taylor Sheridan. I watched this whole show on Paramount during my free trial, and I don't actually know what network it originally even premiered on. Probably USA or something, if it even did at all. But the point is, this is a crime drama centered around a prison that ends up being run by our main character, and he's sort of basically the warden of this prison, which has an incredible amount of influence in this town system. Did we have a question?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Can you post this script in the chat, because the screen is a little blurry for me, so I wouldn't be able to read the script.
Yeah, okay. Oh, whoops, I just linked the direct file path. One sec. I found it pretty easily. Here it is. Did that work? Why did that? Oh, I hate these direct links. Can I copy it like this? Copy link. Okay. There you go. I think does that work? Yes, that does work. This was a pretty good show. I liked about 75% of the show. And it's just, there's some stumbles and missteps and maybe some things that I would say not to emulate as much. And that's always going to be the case. I mean, like, even if a show is great, there's going to be some things that we can point to and say, okay, this is what this writer did and this is why. And this is why you, as a newer writer trying to break in, might want to be careful of this or avoid this or anything like that. For instance, there are some, what I would consider somewhat problematic descriptions of female characters in this show, for instance. Just like things like that. That we don't want to emulate as much. I don't even know if that we get to that in these opening pages, but just things to be aware of. Just because we like a script or want to demonstrate a moment from it doesn't mean we always think every single element of it is 10 out of 10. But this opening scene does all those things that I was just talking about, which is answer the question of who is the main character? What is the world that he's in? What is unique about this take and this sort of specific approach to this world that he's in? And what are we going to be doing in the show? Let's check out the opening scene. We will start in exterior Kingstown Park, and right off the bat, I'm like, oh, watch out for these hanging lines. Taylor Sheridan, highly successful screenwriter. But, if this was a student script, I'd be like, watch out for these little lines that hang down because they will increase your page count. We want to usually avoid saying maybe something, maybe anything, indefinite language for characters. But I'm not going to critique the script too much just because this is, even though there are little flaws I can look at in the writing, there's typos on page 1. There's a comma here in the character name element. I'm not going to focus too much on just the actual writing on the page, and I'm going to look at more just the scene itself. So let's just not focus on the words and look at what happens. So a boy holds a tennis racket in a park. That's our opening shot. He tosses it up and down and swings the racket. He's just playing around. He launches the ball in the air, and it sails through the morning until a hand reaches into frame and catches it. And now we sort of pull back, and from a distance we see that guy walking towards the boy across the meadow. He reaches down and kneels next to him. Normally we'd want to describe, in our scripts, we'd want to describe this guy. But if you are Taylor Sheridan, you don't always have to. He kneels down and says, "That was good." And the boy's like, thanks. And the guy pulls $20 from his wallet and hands it to the kid and says, remember where I told you to stand? The kid's like, yep, got it. No further. Beside the tree. All right, so the boy walks through the meadow towards a large stand of trees. He reaches a pine tree, takes 3 steps forward, tosses the tennis ball in front of him, and with all of his might, he swings and smashes it like he was just practicing. And we do this. I would say don't write angle-ons, but you can see why. It's sort of an old-fashioned way of doing this now. But we're showing this guy standing alone in the meadow. He watches the tennis ball sail through the air, and he starts walking in the opposite direction. So he's just paid the kid to do something. We're not sure what it is or what it means yet. I wonder what's going on in the show. We asked these questions on page 1, haven't we? What's going on here? Who is that guy? Why would you pay a kid $20 to hit a tennis ball? What's happening? Raise an interesting question, and then we will start to answer those questions already. Let's look at the voiceover. He says, this is never what I wanted, never where I thought I'd be. But then, I'd never been anywhere else. Even when they sent me away, they just sent me right back. I wonder what that means. What is he talking about? The ball cuts through the haze, climbing and climbing. I guess it's saying the haze is sort of climbing. So we're following the ball as it's descending through the air. He says, every member of my family fights this fight, one way or another. But so does every family who calls Kingstown home. And the ball hits the earth and rolls over close-cropped weeds, trying to pass for grass. Nice description there. Feet amble by in every direction, all wearing white sneakers. Interesting. Remember, we're revealing just one thing at a time. First we say, there's a kid in a field. Guy pays him $20 to hit a tennis ball. Wonder what's going on. He hits the tennis ball and it rolls across the ground. We see feet. Okay. Then we see they're all wearing identical shoes. Okay, that's another fact that's interesting. We're like, what is happening here? They step in and walk all around the ball, but none of them touch it. The sneakers scatter and a pair of black combat boots step into frame. I wonder who's wearing those. A hand reaches down to scoop it up, and we rise up to see that these sneakers belong to inmates. Oh, that's what's going on here. We're in the yard of Kingstown Maximum Security Prison, following a guard as he wades through the prisoners milling through the yard. The guard walks towards, we meet our first named character here. The first name, even our main character doesn't have a name yet. We meet our first named character here, Alfonso, 40s, with decades of pain scarring his face. Alfonso never looks in the guard's direction, but he grabs the ball, the tennis ball, he takes a razor blade, cuts it open, and takes out stacks of hundreds of dollar bills from inside. And he drops the disemboweled ball, what a great way of explaining that, to the dirt, and white sneakers trample past as our camera slowly rises to see the entire prison. You see, we could have started this with a shot of the prison. A shot of all the inmates together. We're in prison. Welcome to Kingstown. No, we don't start like that at all. We reveal these things piece by piece. We raise an interesting question. And then we start to answer those questions in a way that builds reader confidence that you will be in good hands in the story. So we finish the scene by, we start to see, oh, that was a prison. He says, what was the last line he said? So does every family who calls Kingstown home. So do a lot of families who will never call it home, but they live here anyway. Waiting, always waiting. Now it's up to me to keep the rats in the cage content, and the keepers from becoming the rats themselves. That almost sounds like the hooky intro to a reality show, in that, you want not quite a reality show, that sort of like genre of History Channel work show where it's like, I'm Max Jefferson and I run a lockup, and it's my job to make sure that all the auctions, whatever they do in reality shows. You get the idea. But the point is, we very quickly summed up what the main character's goal is and who he is. It's my job to keep the rats in the cage content and the keepers from becoming the rats themselves. The camera climbs higher, and we see another prison and another, and they start to surround. They're like completely surrounding this area. There's 7 prisons, a forest with no end, as it's described. And he says, the last lines in our opening scene are, this is a company town, and our business is incarceration. 7 prisons in a 10-mile radius, 20,000 lost souls with no hope, no future, and I'm their link to a world that doesn't want them. I'm the life raft. I'm the mayor of Kingstown. That's 2 pages that shows us a main character who at first we do not know anything about, and that we learn just piece by piece who he is and what's going on here, what is his role in this world. And let me ask this question: what is unique about this setup, and why do we start on this? Like any other show about people who run a prison, why is this going to be different from those?
Can you explain one quick thing?
Sure.
The guy that's narrating is the guy that paid the boy and is the guy that the prison guard?
No.
Oh.
It's the our main character is just and it is a little confusing when they just refer to them as man or woman or something, so I can see why you might get lost in something like that. But no, he's on an he's currently on a hill overlooking the prison. He pays a kid to hit the ball into the prison, and then a prisoner picks it up and takes money out of it. That's basically all that happens
Okay.
here.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
Right.
And the guy the main character is the guy that paid the boy.
That's right.
And how is he related to the prison?
Well, he as
You don't
he tells
know
us
yet.
well, we do know because in the voiceover, he kind of tells us, where is it? It's up to me to keep the rats in the cage content, telling us he's in charge of the prison. He's like essentially the warden.
Oh, he is the okay. Okay, that's what I thought.
He's the warden's brother. He's just like it becomes clear as the pilot goes on what's happening here.
Got it.
He's in charge basically.
Okay, go back to your question that you asked. So.
Okay, sure. So the question was, what is the unique hook that this opening scene sets up? How is this different from every other prison? I don't know. Maybe you guys don't watch a lot of prison shows or crime. Let's just say, how is this going to be different from other shows with a similar setup to this? What is the unique hook or take here? Go ahead.
I can think of like two. So like I think like the scene hook is like, of course, as you mentioned, like, okay, why is he paying a kid $20 to hit a ball?
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the kind of more macro hook is, oh, why is this guy on the outside of prison smuggling money into prison? What will the relationship be between the guy on the outside and I'm not sure if I can't really read it, if it was a warden or just like the administrators inside the prison, and what is the relationship between those two? Why are they doing stuff like smuggling money? And yeah,
Logan knows his crime dramas. You're 100% correct. This is going to be a unique setup of relationship between the people who run the prison and the people inside it. And if you have to hit a tennis ball over a wall to give money to your own prisoners, clearly something's going on there that is not on the books, right? Our main character is going to work outside the system and outside the law. He's a criminal himself, and he is going to have this relationship with the prisoners and with the criminals that is going to, blend that boundary of where does one begin and where does the other end.
I was going to say, but I haven't seen a lot of crime dramas, but except for Orange is the New Black, in that usually it's through the eyes of a prisoner, or at least my one reference point is that it's told through the eyes of the prisoners, and in this case it's through the eyes of someone related to the warden. So that's a different point of view that I've not seen.
That's a good point. Yeah. So an ensemble show will often have some of both, or some characters in both worlds, but this one is primarily through the eyes of the people, the administrators who run the prison, and also just due to the specific nature of the world that this takes place in. What's the unique world that this takes place in? This isn't just any prison, is it? What's unique about this?
It's in a city of prisons? I don't know what's unique about it yet.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. 7 prisons in a 10-mile radius? That is we're a company town, and our business is incarceration. That's not true for every prison. This is a town that's entirely centered on the prison industry, which is the unique world of this. This is a show that is going to be an extended commentary on America's sort of business-like for-profit prison system, and the undue influence that those people who run those prisons have in that whole town and the surrounding state. So just by being the mayor of this network of 7, or he calls himself the mayor of Kingstown, that's his way of saying, because I run the prisons, I run the whole town. So the unique world that we're in is a town centered around incarceration. This really exists, by the way, and this is not a real show, but is based on a town in Canada, I believe, that has 9. If you think it's unrealistic to have 7 prisons in one area, it sounds like Kingstown. It's something kind of like Kingstown. I think it's in Ontario, but it's 9 prisons and that smaller radius. So this is actually pulled back from how bad it is in real life.
I have a question. So kind of, what is like really common to like cold opens, especially in something like crime drama, where it's like, I think kind of the point of you showing us this is like how limited context can like build intrigue for the audience, and I actually can see more like, oh, what's going on here? Why is there like something weird? And like this is seen like a lot in cold opens. at the beginning of the episode. I'm wondering if this technique, like let's just say you use it a lot like later in the pilot or in the episode, will it get kind of like annoying or dry, or is it just best reserved for the start of the episode?
You mean the idea of seeing stuff that we don't know the context yet, then we learn the context later, and it elucidates something for us, or it like adds something to our understanding of the show or the world?
Yeah, and like especially a lot of it is like visual. That's a thing I noticed about cold opens, especially in crime kind of things. Especially.
You can do it either way. You can do that. Like that stuff is very effective at the beginning, because that's like one of those easy ways of intriguing the audience and bringing them in and making them say, "Oh, I wonder what the answer to that question is." "Oh, that's the answer to that question, but here's another question on top of it," kind of thing. But it sometimes works throughout the show too. If you watch another crime drama, is called, what is it called? We Own the City on HBO. Which is a crime show that stars John Barenthal. It's about corrupt Baltimore cops, basically. But the whole show, we're watching a group of criminals as they act as informants to the cops, and one of them plans a robbery and commits this robbery. And then at the end of the episode, we find out, oh, wait, they were cops too. So you can do that anytime. Like, it takes an hour for that question to be resolved. Who are these people? How are they connected to what's going on? It's, in fact, kind of a huge gut punch at the end to realize these criminals we've been following for the whole time are in fact also on the same police squad as our main character. Make sense? So you can do it all throughout, but it's most effective at the beginning, and it should be used with a light touch.
Yeah, I noticed a lot also in like procedurals. It'll be like the cold open of like the murder or something, but there's something weird about it, and then you'll kind of find out with the detectives or whatever what's weird about it, and there's just one little piece, and then it gets resolved throughout the whole thing. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it. Any questions or comments based on this opening scene to this pilot? I realize I spent a while on this, but I just want to make sure that we're getting this idea that in just 2 pages we have set up main character, unique story world, conflict, and the take on what we're going to be watching here. How is this going to be different from everything else we've seen that's like this? Any questions or comments on this?
Real life.
Sorry, one more time. I think we just cut off part of that.
It's just like real life.
It's like real life, yeah. It's a depressingly realistic show at times, but you learn some interesting things. It's kind of, I really like the dynamic between the main character and the leader of the gang in the area. They're just sort of friends on the outside of the prison, and it's cool. I recommend this show. I would recommend, if I can, just highlight the kinds of descriptions we want to be really careful of. This is one of the worst descriptions of a main character I've seen in a long time. I just want to really quick, I don't want to harp on this because Taylor Sheridan is a very good and very exceedingly successful writer, but I just want to very quickly point at something that I'd be like, if I saw this from a student script, I would recommend that you reconsider how to phrase this. A waiting room filled with inmates' wives and ex-cons. Behind the desk sits Rebecca, 30, face of a 40-year-old. Body of a 20-year-old. Heavy makeup hides the age in her face. A skirt that's too short and a blouse that's too low to brag about her body. The effect is more desperation than arousal. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this?
That's the part I thought was good.
No, this is super sexist. This is like very, very, very ugly. Go ahead.
You could say a woman that's lived a hard life that's dressing too young for her age. I think that would be a little better way of. I know I can picture that kind of person with a much short. We all know people that have lived a hard life that are dressing too young for their age, and maybe they're a former alcoholic or something. But he's saying it in such a sexist way when a man, there could be a man kind of the equivalent of that. Could do a gender.
Do you think we'd have a male character that was described as, let's just swap it.
No.
Behind a desk sits Jackson, face of a 40-year-old, body of a 20-year-old. Heavy makeup hides the age. Like every sentence is a comment on the character's attractiveness, body, or how much they turn on the reader. You can't do this.
And also, I just feel like the fact that it just keeps going on. It's like 4 sentences.
It just keeps going.
Like, it makes me feel like almost like hyperbolic and like kind of ridiculous.
The author got heartbroken by a woman like this.
Maybe. And I mean, the thing is, like, it's actually, I really like this character in the show. Rebecca is one of the coolest characters in the whole show. She's great. But the description on the page would be something that would get this. Somebody would probably not read beyond that if that's how you're going to be writing this. I don't want to harp on it too much. Like I said, I like the show, and it is well written, and some of the scene work is really fantastic and great character stuff. But just something to be aware of and to be watching for. Don't describe characters just in terms of how much they turn you on, please. And that goes for, it goes for everybody. No matter what any gender, anything. Don't just look at characters' body or how hot they are. There's so much more to a person. And by the way, whoever they cast is probably going to be pretty attractive. They're Hollywood actors. Like, you have to go pretty far out of your way to find Hollywood actor casting that's not going to be someone who's pretty attractive. So regardless of that, I hope that we are. Go ahead.
Kind of confused. This does kind of confuse me. Well, for the fact that this is presumably fiction, and that description of the woman, it is to the T fits. We work a lot with, those who have afflictions with drugs and alcohol and different people in and out of prison and stuff like that. In my regular life, and I've worked in a prison before, and so it just really strikes me as being so realistic. But when Amanda said, well, it could be said like this, then it kind of did clear it up for me. Okay, there's a way to say it,
right?
So yeah, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's like it's the difference between saying that someone dresses like it's summer versus when it's winter, versus saying someone she's too old to deserve to wear a skirt like that. See what I mean? Like, you can say the same thing in many different ways, that some of them come across as just kind of gross, and some of them are more like, she dresses like it's summer even when it's winter. It's like, okay, you can get the idea there. So it comes down to the tone of what you're saying, and the way that you're saying
right.
It's just as important as the actual thing that you're saying.
Right, and to that also, I want to add that I'm not a fan of cursing.
Okay.
Which you won't find a lot of cursing in my scripts. So I thought to myself, I could never make it as a screenwriter, right? Because everyone curses. So I'm not a fan of it.
There's plenty of writing that has no cursing in it. Network TV does not have nowadays network TV has lots of cursing in it, but there's plenty of types of TV writing and screenwriting that don't. I mean, look at a PG movie.
Right. And then for example, also, I'm just giving you an example, and You're Next, when she puts that blender on that guy's head, remember that? Okay, that was so offensive to me. You see what I'm saying? It's I was so offended and disturbed by that. I can't let it just, Linda Blair's arm, I think I told you guys about that before. It's there's just so many things that ways that people can be offended. I don't know. Just I'm a little bit confused.
You were just shocked by the viscerality of the violence of that moment. You mean?
Well, yeah, but it's it was a really cool. But no, that it's not the point that I'm so offended. I'm gonna sue these people. Mm-hmm. But no, it's I think I'm a little bit surprised that offending people is an issue in script writing at this point, because I see a lot of people like this, movies in general too. I mean, there is a lot of sexism. I don't even like that word, to be honest with you. It's there's a lot of that in society. It's just the way things are. So it's when you see it in a script, to me, it just kind of seems very normal. It's
the difference is, is it the characters that are acting that way, or does it feel like it's the writer who is viewing the world and who is behaving that way? And that's where you're going to offend people. You're not going to offend people by having any amount of swearing. I mean, some people don't like to watch violent things or things with lots of swearing. That's one thing. But readers who are reading scripts to decide what's going to get made, they're not going to get offended if they see characters swearing or killing each other. They will start to feel like the author is out of touch with the current climate of society if it feels like the author themselves is being the whatever racist one or sexist one or anything like that. So
Okay.
that's the
Okay.
main
I think I
difference there.
do. I think I do understand that. If the reader is reading that the writer has some kind of issue with women, maybe some kind of a disdain toward women or something. Okay, I think I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Good questions. Good discussion. So we just have a couple minutes left here. So I want to just leave a little time for questions, and let me just flip ahead real quick. Yeah, actually, let's check those final loglines. So if we have revisions of loglines from today, can I take another look? And I'll give you the green stamp, or what is it, green check mark, before we move forward. So if you had been working on one, you can feel free to post it now. Thank you, Josh. And just in the interest of time, I'll read them as they come up. And you don't have to answer questions and respond on these, but unless I have a big question. But let me just double check it, and I'll give you the stamp. All right. Josh has series logline: in the era before the demise of VHS, a video rental employee and her staff. I think you mean in an era where VHS is actively dying or something like that. If you say it's before the demise of VHS, that could be any time between when VHS was invented and when it, declined. In the era of the declining video store, something like that is what you want to go for. Imply that it's like the time that it's actively dying. But you're close. A video store employee and her staff must band together to keep the store in business by taking inspiration from their favorite movies. The rest, 100% green stamp. On her first day working at a video store, a nervous, movie-obsessed young woman takes inspiration from the pot of Rue window to catch an elusive shoplifter. 10 out of 10 green stamp.
Awesome.
Sound good, Josh?
That sounds great. I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
I don't want to be redundant, but I really want to say something to the effect of "in the era of the declining video store," but then my next word is video store, and I can't think of, because when I hope to have this take place, VHS wasn't really a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's less VHS, it's declining home media, isn't it?
That's good. Physical media?
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know the exact answer, but you'll find, because video stores weren't just renting VHS, they were also renting DVD. I rented a lot of PlayStation 2 games from video stores, so they had other stuff too. And maybe even you could do an episode, if they're renting games and stuff too, she could do like a Bomberman episode, or we could do a Frogger. Like, there's lots of, you have lots of room to play with there.
Oh, I definitely, in my notes somewhere, I have that there's a video game tournament after the store is closed, or maybe even during, because nobody's going to the store anymore. So thank you for the feedback.
Sure. This is looking really good. Thanks, Josh.
I appreciate it.
Let's check. So Amanda, yeah, your series logline was good. Still working on pilot logline. You can post later today and get feedback in the text channels if you want to. Logan has a revised logline for us too. Let's read it out. A zealous boy must team up with the venerated spirits in his dead father's magic gauntlets to kill the advisor that betrayed the nation and killed his father. Oops, the ending is a little bit sort of redundancy there, but I loved the beginning of this. A zealous boy must team up with the spirits in his venerated spirits. I'm like, what exactly does that mean? Maybe imply its personality type. Is it a capricious, angry spirit? Is it a guiding, loving spirit? So maybe use that word to explain how it's going to behave more than venerated. It's like its status in society, which we don't really care about for a logline. So think of how does it behave. To kill the advisor that betrayed the nation and killed his father. It's just that we have to say the word father. Try to avoid saying the word father twice. The advisor that betrayed the nation and killed his father. Try to avoid doubling up on words. I think you're close with that one. That one's sounding really good. The series logline: a zealous boy balances the wills of godlike spirits who possess and power magical artifacts. He needs to battle the utilitarian ruler. What does utilitarian mean? Let's Google that really quick.
He means totalitarian.
That might be what he means.
Probably.
Yeah, this
No,
means,
I don't mean utilitarian.
yeah, that means very practical. So you mean an evil overlord?
Oh,
basically.
I kind of meant it in like the philosophical sense, where it's like you believe that the greatest good for the greatest number is worth more than any sort of like moral kind of ideals. That kind of makes any sense. Like
Yeah,
kind of like
sure.
it might be something similar to like Thanos or like
But it's
something
sort of
like
you're
that.
sort of just saying an evil guy though, because every evil person thinks that what they're doing is worth the evil stuff that they're accomplishing, don't they?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe be a little more specific there. I need to check the series logline one more time. I'm not sure what's up with my presentation. Wise, there we go. Okay. A zealous boy balances the wills of God. Like he's not balancing things. He's going on a quest to gather them, isn't he? To gather these magic
Yes.
stuff, the magic things.
When he gets another one, it's like there's another like spirit, and then the spirit has like its own goals and stuff, and he has to kind of follow its wishes.
I understand. So a boy's on a quest to collect a series of possessed artifacts. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's probably you're phrasing this too much on the social dynamics of what he's doing, and then so for the series logline, tell us. Remember, this is like a quest journey, is this like a travel log where he has to go to a different place and find some new doodad in every episode?
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, you want to emphasize that quest. Forget about balancing the wills of the spirits and explaining exactly they possess and power magical artifacts he needs to battle the utilitarian ruler who desires them all. A kid is on a quest to gather a series of magically possessed artifacts in order to defeat the villain that's trying to get them. That's more along the lines of what you want. You're pretty close, though. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Logan. Let me check our last one here. So, Violet's Blue, all right, series logline. In an attempt to fund her sister's life-saving surgery, so I think we can just take a couple words out. To fund her sister's life-saving surgery, a new writer turns to a family friend, an eccentric Hollywood playwright, to help sell her ideas. But her blinding naivete, reckless risk-taking, and undiagnosed mental illness may make her the one that needs saving. Okay, great. Sounds good. You get the green stamp. Just try to, where you can, take out a word here or there, just to make sure that we are.
I agree. Yeah, I think it could be read a little smoother, but at least the basic things are there.
Yeah. You answered all the questions, and I think that you've done a lot of good work here, so you get the green stamp. Thanks, Amanda. I think that's all. Did I miss anyone, or does anyone have a logline that they didn't share, or anything like that? Feel free to chime in now, because we have to have that logline finalized by the end of, I don't know, today.
I'm ready to post mine in a couple minutes, but should I just do it in the regular chat for the class?
We have to end the session, so just feel free to do so in the chat, and we can respond on there. But sounds like everyone's in a pretty good spot, so I'm glad we got that extra time to really work on loglines today. For next week, what you want to do is finalize that logline, fill out that sketchbook, and you're going to read an entire pilot, professional pilot, from beginning to end. I'm going to go down the list and ask every single person, what pilot did you read? So there won't be any skating out of this one. You gotta do this, and be ready. It's not a quiz. There's not trick questions. It's just, what did you think? What did you learn? What did you notice? That's really it. You must be reading pilots in order to write pilots. You cannot do screenwriting without reading. Okay, if you still need to enroll, you can do so scriptcamp.net/classes, or you can sign up for membership, and it comes with the 2 week. The many students who've already signed up for this might be able to help us answer any questions you have, or I'm sure if you're new and you're just joining these discussions, it might seem sort of overwhelming. There's students who are already signed up for this and have been in these for a while and stuff, but we're very welcoming and open to all skill levels here, so please let us know if you have any questions about this, or if we can help you out at all. Next week is on Broad Strokes, that outline where we figure out what happens in the episode. We also have, I don't want to go over it now, but you can look now at the schedule for the Sci-Fi Bootcamp coming up. So pause your streams now if you want to read this one. And then we have writer groups going on as well: sketch comedy, animation, comedy, and horror. That's all happening on different days, and all have forms that you can apply to join them or start your own. You can contact Nacho or me to do that and fill out our form. We have many different members all around the world, and you can trade critiques and swap scripts with them, and it's a great resource. I already mentioned how you can get feedback. I think that brings us to the end. I'll take any last questions, and we will call today's session. Any last questions, comments, or thoughts? All right, we're going to wrap class for today then. Thank you so much for coming to week 1 of our TV Bootcamp. There are 5 weeks after this, so if you want to keep participating and follow along and write a pilot all the way to the end of your first draft, please sign up for Script Camp, and we'd be glad to see you here. All right, thanks so much, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Script swaps start at, the table read starts at 2.